Welcome to the channel, everyone. This video I'm going to talk about pulling clamps and safety using them. Now I've got a bunch of some Mo clamps here, some other brands I'm not even sure what they are, but you should know what the load rating is on these things. And I've got an old catalog. This is back from the 90s, but it'll tell you what the ratings are on them, if they're 4 ton, 5 ton, 7 ton. So you should know what your maximum pull should be on it. This is the only one I have. It's marked right on there. It says 3 ton. And this is a real handy clamp. Get into smaller areas and it's a straight pull. Now one thing you have to watch with these bolts will get worn out, the threads. This one here, I think it's only been replaced maybe once in the last probably 30 years I've had this. And it spins by hand. I keep it greased up. Try not to use an impact gun on these things. You don't really have to squeeze it like it's, it's not going to slide off on something because you're doing an angle pull. The only way it could slide off is if it starts to bend. But make sure the threads are in good shape on the bolt, and also inside this thing, in the shank there, that they're not getting stripped out. Because being that the only thing that's holding this clamp together is the thread of the bolts, you don't want that thing to strip out of there and come flying out. Now the jaws on these things, you want to keep them nice and clean. They'll get sealants in there, caulking, chip guard and stuff from pulling on different things. You want to keep those clean so they can bite into the metal. And if they get worn down, you can file them down. You can take a little grinder and you can touch them up. Keep those teeth sharp. So you want to match the clamp to what you're pulling. These are made to do a straight pull. You don't want to grab this thing and then twist it, pull it sideways. You're probably not going to hurt the clamp, but you're going to do more damage to the vehicle. Another type of, this is Sill hook here, and I think this is rated about 7 ton. These are real handy. Same thing, you got to keep these jaws, these teeth on here clean. These got a little bit of stuff in them. They need to be cleaned out, but you can touch up the teeth with a grinder. And these are handy, but they're probably one of the most dangerous ones out there because they can slide off. So if I can get it onto something, if I can back it up and fill a void with a block of wood, I'll do it to keep it from pushing off, sliding off. Sometimes if you can grab it with vice grip, get some clamps on here to help hold it. But they'll pull a lot of weight, but you have to be careful. And if you're pulling the max 7 ton, it's a lot of power in there, a lot of pressure. If it does slide off, you can hurt yourself, kill yourself, do some damage. So keep an eye on these when you're pulling. Don't be talking to your buddy while you got your foot on the pedal and just let the thing pull. Keep an eye on it. Make sure there's nobody standing in line of the chains or your equipment while you're pulling. But these are real handy, but they're also real dangerous. This here is a handy hook, and they're probably more dangerous than these, but these are usually used just on sheet metal, but you can still do a lot of pulling on them. I use a lot on rocker panels, going to be replaced. You can pop some holes in there, pull it out, pull on it. Sometimes light pulls, core supports, stuff like that. You can get into certain holes. You got to watch so you don't do more damage with it because it doesn't have a lot of surface contact. It'll stretch stuff out. But they do have their purpose and they're really handy. Now one thing I like using, I'll take this eye off the end of it, and if I need to pull something, say like a hinge bolt or something, A pillar or B pillar, you get the bolt to fit the hole, get an extra bolt and a washer, drop it down in there. You can screw that in and put your hook on there. So the other end, the eye, is real handy for other types of pulling. Now one of the probably most misused clamps out there are these wedge type clamps. And you never want to put an impact gun on these things. This bolt is the original bolt. That clamp's 25, 30 years old. It's original bolt. And I just put a ratchet on there. I snug it up. The way these things work, you've got that wedge in there. And the harder you pull, farther that slides out, the more pressure it puts down here because it opens this up. If you put an impact on there and you tighten that thing up right off the get-go, that wedge won't slide and it won't tighten up. It stays locked in place, and the only thing you're doing is relying on this bolt to hold that together, and they're not going to hold. And I've seen guys, they'll slide off, they'll put it back on, put the impact on there. Before you know it, they got the bolt the threads are all galled up, it won't tighten up. So, like I said, snug that up with a wrench or a socket. Take you a 2-pound hammer. Once you put some tension on there, start pulling, tap on the sides of this. And when you're doing that, watch down here, and every time you hit it, you'll see that thing move just a little bit. That's doing what it's supposed to. It's tightening up. And usually when you're done pulling, you can just give that a pop with the hammer and it'll release without even taking your socket to it, because you've let this open up, did what it was supposed to. When it releases, it takes the tension off of here. So use that correctly. I don't think I've even put grease on this bolt here because I've never over tightened it. And it's nice to, if you've got several of these, I've got a smaller version here, does the same thing. And once again, you want to keep these jaws in here clean and sharp. You can put several of them together, and if you've got a piece of, let me see what I got here. Solid steel bar like this dolly here, you can put those in there together and put you a double hook on there and make a pull on them. And same thing, tap on both sides of those at the same time, or while you're pulling on both of them, keep those tight. But usually these things, I mean, they'll hold tight. You get them on there and you won't have any trouble with them slipping off. You'll actually tear the metal out of what you're pulling on. So you have to keep an eye on that. But if they're used correctly, they're not going to slip off. Now I have had, and I don't remember what vehicle it was, some of these steels are getting so hard that these jaws just don't bite in, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get it to grab. I wasn't going to put an impact on there, but tighten it up and it would always want to slide. And I'd look at the metal that I was pulling on, and these jaws didn't really even leave any marks to it. It's just too tough to really bite in and grab onto it. But use them correctly and they'll work like they're supposed to. Now another type of a hook here, you can use this as a chain shortener. You can put one in this way, one in there, either hook 2 chains together or take slack out of a chain. And it's got this adapter for going into frame holes. And I'm not sure what the rating is on this. It's probably around 3 or 4 ton. But now this attachment is going to take a lot less pressure than this one. So, if the thing is rated for 3 ton, I don't know if they're going off of the minimum, which may be the case, or the maximum, but you're not going to use that hook right there and straighten the school bus frame. The bottom one, you're gonna do quite a bit of pulling with it or anchoring, and it's not going to distort a hole too much. The bottom one will do some damage. You can either rip a hole out, it's going to distort it pretty good. So keep an eye when you're using it. Use it where if it's something you're pulling on, it's going to be replaced. You're not worried about the damage. No big deal. But if you're pulling on a rail, it's going to be sectioned or replaced. But keep an eye on it. Watch what it's doing, and it has its limitations like everything else. But they're a great hook. Now, this clamp here. Now this clamps just by squeezing together. So these I usually keep oiled up, and I'll put an impact on these, and don't over tighten them. But you can see how those jaws are offset with each other in there, and that steel it'll actually just kind of form right inside there. And these things do a good job on pulling or anchoring on a pinch weld somehow, or some way where it could be an anchor. Usually you shouldn't use this an anchor point to tie in a car down, but you want to grab a frame rail or something that has a pinch weld. You're trying to stretch it, get it into place, but they do a good job. These things here, they hold pretty good, but they'll want to slide off, and you can usually watch the back end of it. It'll kind of come down a little bit. It's going to let loose, so back off. Sometimes you'll just see the whole thing sliding. If it's to that point, you've either got some sealants or some caulkings or undercoating in there. You want to keep the pinch welds cleaned off, or clean them off before you put these clamps on. Use a scraper or something to get all the corrosion protection material off of there ahead of time. These T-hooks are real handy. These things here, well, it's like what the car transport carriers use. And those will go into a hole, an oblong shaped hole. Usually you don't find them in the front rails or rear rails. They're right underneath like your torque box areas of the cars. And those usually those holes are reinforced. There'll be a double layer. They're pretty heavy. But these are good for a supplement if you need an extra anchor point. You don't rely on just one or two of these to anchor a vehicle down. They are strong, but you're usually using it for a secondary anchor point. So usually don't find too many holes that these will fit into on a frame rail on the front anyway. It's usually round holes or something like that. Okay, got a couple double hooks here. These both have the same size hooks on each end. This has a slip hook. And this works where you want to grab something that's other than just a chain. You want to grab a piece of metal that you got between, like I said, between two clamps. You're going to use it some, on a lot of stuff like this, because some of these things won't fit into there. They're just not made to fit that. So use a double hook or the slip hook into your pulling clamps here. And I don't know why this is. I've worked with guys, and every time they're on the frame rack pulling something, a chain flies off, a chain breaks, a clamp breaks. I don't know what they're doing wrong. I never want to be around them when they're pulling, but they're not using the equipment right. Something's going on with it. So, be safe. Okay, and like I said, know the limitations on these things. Know what the rating is on these clamps. And you should have on all your pulling equipment, either on the foot pump or the tower, a hydraulic pressure gauge. And that's going to tell you how much pressure you're putting on there. If you got a clamp, say this one here is 3 ton, don't go over 6,000 pounds on your gauge. Another reason for having a gauge on your towers or on your foot pump, if you've made a pull on something and you've got to swing the front of a car over and you don't have a 3D measuring system to watch your progress, you can look at your gauge and say you put 6,200 pounds of pressure on it, you release it, and then you take your tram gauge to it. You still need a little more. You maybe need 3-4 millimeters. You got to go past 6,200 pounds of pressure to gain any more out of it. So you might run up to 7,000 pounds. Then you do your measurement, your cross measurement. If that did it, fine. But your gauge will show you where you're at, show you progress as you're pulling, besides how much load you're putting on your clamps. So the main thing is stay safe with these things. Don't want anybody getting hurt. These clamps will last you a lifetime, but match them for the job. Know what they're used for, match it accordingly, and like I said, they'll last you forever. Take care of them. So I hope you got something out of this video, some tips and tricks, and thanks for watching.